Hi, everyone. Harry here to talk about the felony assault charges filed against a Congresswoman from New Jersey, Monica McIver, by acting U.S. Attorney Alina Habba, whose name you may recognize from her stalwart service to Trump over the last several years, including being a serial election denier, including doing all kinds of things to get her in hot water with various courts and sanctions for basically mendacious behavior. Okay, so here she's the acting U.S. attorney in New Jersey that covers the whole state. This is a tangled web, and I think it's worth trying to spin it out a bit so you can understand why the charges stink to high heaven. And when you think about charges brought by a U.S. attorney, it's very, very hard for the fact of charging to be unlawful, although she may have achieved that milestone here. But you really judge a U.S. attorney based on their adherence to DOJ policy and procedures. They're charging in an equal way, same people for same kinds of crimes and the like, and in all kinds of standard professional ways. Habba fails spectacularly and has done several things that look to be really nasty, ugly, and add to an already overwhelming case that the DOJ has just been turned into a Roy Cohn outpost to get at Donald Trump's political opponents. So let me start there, because while the details that lead to her arrest happen on the 9th of May, the story starts, I think, March 27th. Newly installed acting U.S. attorney actually says of her office, "We could turn New Jersey red. Hopefully, while I'm there, I can help that cause. We can turn New Jersey red. Hopefully, while I'm there, I can help that cause." Hard really to imagine a more succinct kind of expression of what the job is not supposed to be. It's like, a breathtaking thing for a new U.S. attorney to say, "I want to use my office to help turn New Jersey red." Flagrantly improper, just head spinning, so bad it almost makes you laugh, except it ain't funny. And certainly Representative McIver doesn't find it funny. Okay, now we come to the 9th, which is when the conduct that had led to her charges occur. She and two other members of a congressional delegation show up to do an inspection of an ICE facility where detainees are held. This one's a little bit different because it's being repurposed to that end by a private facility that's sort of contracted to the U.S., but it's ICE that has to be in charge, that is in charge. And by the way, it's perfectly proper standard procedure to show up unannounced by members of Congress to oversee these facilities, make sure they're on the up and up, treating detainees properly and the like. They've done it before, and here they just did it again. So nothing to fault her for showing up. Okay, she is joined by the Mayor Baraka of Newark. A crowd has formed in their sort of support, and it's part of the overall Sturm und Drang in this country about the way that the administration is treating deportees, especially in blue states where they don't want to facilitate what the government's trying to do. That's a whole nother interesting legal topic for another day. Enough has happened here on the facts. Okay, they show up. They wait over an hour. Nobody ushers them in. Nobody knows. In general, the whole situation it's clear. chaotic. No one knows what's going on really. And, you don't treat members of Congress that way. ICE has not been really trained. They don't show up for a while. Okay. And when they do, at a certain point, a car with a member of the delegation drives in to what is a sort of mid-station kind of ante-room almost, though it's outdoors between the public property where everyone is, including demonstrators, and the facility within. The mayor is just permitted to enter with the rest of them. The administration explains later the guard there thought it was fine. And so now the mayor and 3 or 4 members of the delegation are there waiting for their tour to begin. At that point, an ICE official comes out and starts jawboning the mayor, saying, "You may not be here. Members of Congress are okay. You may not be here." It gets a little bit heated, and he tells them to leave or he's going to arrest them. Tells them that a few times. The mayor leaves and goes back to the public property. The delegation then awaits their tour. But before they do, people from ICE come out to arrest the mayor, who is now on public property, but they want to arrest him for trespass. Here is one instance of wildly over-aggressive behavior. They take the mayor of Newark, they cuff him. What would you do? The first thing you would do is not charge him. The U.S. attorney probably made this call personally. I would have gotten that call when I was U.S. attorney and say, What happened? He's okay, so fine, forget it. There's no trespass. Forget about it. They didn't forget about it, but it's 100% clear. If you're going to arrest the mayor, you do a summons, you work through his lawyer, they show up in court. This is a purposeful indignity where the mayor is cuffed and sent away to a room where he's held for several hours. Just complete trash. This is really like, bottom feeder behavior by a grandstanding prosecutor. All right. Before it happens, though, when they come out to arrest the mayor, McIver, among others, tries to prevent them, or she says, "Hell no, you can't do that." She and others encircle the mayor, and there is it's a scrum, basically. The complaint from the United States has little still pictures, and in these still pictures, you can see physical contact, occurring between McIver and certain agents. At one point, the elbow's on the back. But if you look at the video, and that's what the jury is going to see, not the select kind of purposely culled out photos. It's a scrum. It's a mess. It's chaos. It's, like a melee. But it's the kind of contact that you might see like in a crowded subway or leaving a crowded stadium. Yes, there's physical contact, but it's like, a real chaos. If I'd been U.S. attorney at the time, that would be my number one concern. Why doesn't ICE know what's going on? If they want to arrest, you don't do it in public. You don't cuff them anyway, but even if you did, it's really on them that this was such a mess and, basically a rugby scrum instead of a methodical arrest. You need to protect officers when this is a bogus arrest, but the law permits them and should permit them protection when they do it. It's not an excuse to say you had no right to arrest. But it's there, the corollary there, an arrest is a very carefully choreographed thing. Not here. Here, they're untrained. They don't know what they're doing. It's a mess, and a scrum kind of occurs. And it's that gives rise to the charges against McIver. By the way, though, after it happens, after he's arrested, they usher the members back they give them the tour for a few hours. They're very nice, no problem, etc. So the notion that she's somehow, some kind of impediment and assaulter of the officers, and she's, totally foiled law enforcement, sure doesn't square with their giving her this tour after. Okay. What happens next? Just a couple days ago, a few things happened. First, the U.S. attorney dismisses the trespassing charge against the mayor. And she says so. She said, "Oh, we're gonna dismiss this at the same time as she's filing charges against McIver." She says, "We're doing this for the sake of moving forward." Excuse me? What the hell does that mean? For the sake of moving forward, that's why you're dismissing charges. If the charges are solid, you go forward. If the charges, aren't valid, you say so. You are honest to the public, and that this is, I think, almost certainly deceptive at best. And one other little detail to add: it was the very day when the United States was obligated to give over what's called Brady information, and that is information that tends to exculpate or make the defendant, give ammunition that they're innocent. And guess what? Because we know this from court, it looks like, and these are the details on which cases turn, that little anteroom that I talked about before the facility may not have been federal land. And they were going to file a motion on that and talk about oops, that you may not, there's no general federal police power. If you're in there, if you're trespassing, you may not trespass under federal law if it's not federal property. So I think it's just probably a total screw up, and they would have ended up with egg on their face. And that's an improper reason to hide. Maybe it'll come clear anyway, but for the sake of moving forward, sounds like 100% horseshit, excuse the expression. All right. So they dismiss against the mayor, but they charge McIver. Now, before they do, we know for a fact that and McIver said so on TV last night, for a couple weeks, they were trying to get her they were trying, what Haba said was really work out the charges. And unfortunately, the mayor wouldn't do it. Well, guess why not? What Haba wanted to do, this is so Trumpian, is establish the Congresswoman's contrition. We were right and you were wrong. Holding the leverage of a charge over her head, they wanted to force her to say, I'm sorry, I did wrong. I shouldn't have done that. I impeded law enforcement, etc. She says, no, I'm not doing it. And she by now has the attorney that's going to represent her in this case. He's been a regular on Talking Feds. His name is Paul Fishman. He's the former U.S. attorney in the District of New Jersey. Before that, he was a real high senior official at DOJ, the position that Todd Blanche now has. Before that, he was a very storied line prosecutor in New Jersey. Don't tell him I said so, because he tends to get a swelled head, but this guy is a pro, knows what he's doing, and if it goes to trial, and I think it is going to go to trial unless DOJ backs down, he's going to totally mop up the floor with them, I believe. More about that in a minute. All right, but they want her to apologize. She says, no, bring it on, and they charge her. Okay, they charge her with 18 U.S.C. 111A. Whoever forcibly assaults, resists, opposes, impedes, intimidates, or interferes with any person that engaged in the performance of official duties. The ICE is being unprofessional, not doing a very good job, but they're engaged in the performance of their official duties. Assaults, resists, opposes. They have some pictures. Her arm is here. She tries to encircle the mayor. So you could see this as a total garbage, over-aggressive failure of prosecutorial discretion case that shouldn't have been brought, but that where they technically may have a case against her, except. And I'm not sure that anyone else has figured this out. I'm patting myself on the back because I looked at at what the jury's going to actually hear. And it gets a little complicated, but stick with me. The big word here is forcibly. It's a separate word. And sometimes jurisdictions have established jury instructions. Third Circuit doesn't on this, but it imports them from the Ninth Circuit. This will be a huge fight if it goes to trial. And guess what the Third Circuit says about forcibly? forcibly here requires an ability to inflict harm, not merely interference with the performance of a duty. This section is not meant, this is the Court of Appeals and the Third Circuit talking, to sweep in all harassment of government officials, nor is it used to penalize frustrating an official without more, even if that action is deliberate. And you can imagine, right? I mean, we've seen demonstrations, cops, it's a dangerous, tough job. God bless them. But, when they're out there and people are screaming at them, maybe even jostling them, that's not what 111 is about. Why not? The word forcibly. And I think if it goes to trial, that's going to really rear up. So I think the charges themselves may not hold up legally. A little bit more, about that. All right. So, one more thing, Haba goes and has a press conference, but doesn't give out the charging documents till the next day. Terrible form, and they've done it before. Bondi did it twice with the Tesla cases and another, the Judge Dugan cases. It's so paramount, so axiomatic that at this stage, a defendant is presumed innocent until proven guilty. The due process clause. And when you dirty him up, and Bondi clearly did that with Dugan, calling her depraved and such, it's a terrible transgression. Now, Haba here, the press conference she tried, as I've said, she's got a hugely checkered record as a lawyer, and, she's who Trump could find when no one would represent him. Be that as it may, she made lip service to, we'll let the justice system play this out, etc. But when you need to have the charging document, among other reasons, because this is like drummed into the head of every U.S. attorney or even a USA. You stick with the four corners of the charging document. You don't go outside of there. It hasn't been proven. You have no right to allege it to the public. It could mess up the jury pool, important facts, etc. Doesn't stop Haba. She nevertheless, goes and does this press conference. Okay, so that's where things stand. McIver finds out about it, not as you're supposed to, professionally, a letter or whatever, but just goes online, and that's how she knows. And so she hasn't had her first appearance yet. We know that Haba said, if she'd only have played ball with us and been contrite, etc. Took a while to lay out these facts. I just want to go through this from sort of quickly from three different vantage points. The first is the law. Is it against the law? So it may well be that it's going to crumble on the failure of the U.S. to be able to prove forcibly, meaning, there's, sort of push and pull, but no ability to inflict harm. They're not afraid she's gonna, give them, real injury, etc. By the way, a huge irony hovering over this whole case. This is the very crowd, and Haba was a serial January 6th denier that is so, cavalier and doesn't care about true assaults on officers that pardons were handed out to 160 of them who they saw as patriots. Now that we saw that, we're talking about serious assaults on officers that inflict, and not only could, but did inflict serious damage. That's then, this is now. So legally, it could collapse unforceably. It's also, there will be motions. I think it's a super hard thing to prove, but it would be illegal. It's very hard for a U.S. attorney to bring it. There's all kinds of ways to bring charges that are stupid, vicious, as opposed to righteous. But it can be illegal if they can show that she did it for political reasons. That's actually would be against the First Amendment. And that would be another reason, to dismiss it. There's no real prospect of then going after her, or what she would have, Haba, that is, she would then have immunity, etc. But on the law, there's a few big possible infirmities. On DOJ practice is the second vantage point. you may not bring a case against a member of Congress without going through the public integrity section in the criminal division. That's really important. It's not just a procedural requirement. They're the ones, look, these are the cases that are totally cause celebs in whatever hometown they're brought against political officials. The U.S. attorney herself or himself is sort of a political official. You really want to make sure that politics are completely out of it. And you have these real pros as one of the crown jewels of the DOJ to be able to say, here's what we do, here's what we don't do. Well, guess what? This is the very section that was dismembered and is basically now, on life support at best. It's the section involved in the Mayor Adams prosecution in New York. The top 5 people all resigned because they were asked to dismiss a case that they knew was righteous under the facts and law, which is how we judge it. And then almost everyone else has left or been fired. So they don't even exist. Moreover, the department, coincident with the bringing of these charges against McIver, actually changed the rules so you don't have to go to public integrity. Why not? Beats the hell out of me, but one obvious reason is it makes it easier for local U.S. attorneys in the, flying the Trump flag to bring charges against local Democratic officials and just bypass that step. Totally stupid and just, bad government. Okay. That's the main thing she didn't do in terms of DOJ stuff. One other thing, there's got to be a prosecution memo here at some point. And a memo that she signed that has to basically make the case, A, McIver's guilty. It's a righteous case. B, we probably can prove it. I'd really like to see the analysis that says they probably can get a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt. I think it's going to be tenuous in the extreme. Do they even see this forcibly point, etc.? So that's, if you go through a normal supervisory structure as opposed to the political and completely inexperienced, by the way, another thing about Haba, she was like a general counsel for a storage company or something. That's her legal background. This wouldn't fly. So another violation of DOJ practice. And then just finally in the courtroom. Look, at this point, there's really no room. DOJ has to fold its tent and say, oops, never mind, as it did with the mayor, or I think they're going to trial. And normally that would be a huge cost and it would really be an injustice. I think here, they've kind of stepped in it. Does McIver great counsel, and I assume that, it's kind of light pro bono or whatever. It doesn't have to worry about financial ruin. And I just want to tell you at trial, I will love if it happens to see Paul Fishman cross-examine the agent who, put in these little stills, but to really force him to, talk about what it was like and what happened. Cross-examine all the people about how arrest is supposed to take place and how they were totally not on the job. Cross-examine about making them wait an hour. I think he can call to the stand. They'll resist. I think he can call Haba to the stand and say, look, this is what you've said before. Isn't it true that you're really doing this for political reasons? I think he'll really, my last point on sort of trial tactics, mop up the floor with them. And remember, this whole thing is in the context of an overall popular groundswell of opposition to what the DOJ is doing. And that's part of our government too. That really is part of our separation of powers. In theory, a completely unbiased jury who you don't have to worry about their ambition or what they're trying to do or what power they're trying to accumulate. They're there to pass the community judgment. And to me, the community judgment, even if this were a close case, I don't really see it as a close case, but the community judgment would be, no, this was not. I'm not even talking about jury nullification, but rather really looking hard at the facts of them. Have you shown this beyond a reasonable doubt? We don't think so. So I think this is a case that sooner or later is going to end with a lot of egg on the face of DOJ unless they sort of back down, tail between their legs. I don't know. It could even figure in Haba's confirmation but the case won't have happened yet. It'll probably be closer to the end of the year, and her confirmation will be coming up soon. But this is really a nasty, stupid case that shouldn't have been brought, and that history will record, and not just history, but the actual facts as it develops will show this to be a really tawdry episode by a very heightened, politicized Department of Justice under Haba and Bondi. And by the way, Trump himself, who came out and made improper statements here about how McIver had, pushed people around, and you can't do that anymore, and those days are over, totally improper. Could have prejudiced the jury. You'll see motions on that as well. But this one will really bring dishonor to the department. It's part of a growing list of things. But man, oh man, they've stepped in it, I think, and it will not end well for them. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.